A blood war that couldn't end. Juliana DeLuca had spent her life avoiding the monsters that ruled the underworld, but when her father was murdered, she had no choice but to make a deal with one. Salvatore Costa, the most feared Don in Naples, watched her with quiet amusement as he slid a contract across the table. "You want protection?" he murmured. "Then you'll wear my ring." Chapter 1. The Scent of Blood and Lilacs. The air in the small florist shop, Fiori di Napoli, was thick with the cloying sweetness of lilies, a scent Juliana had always associated with funerals. Now it was almost unbearable. Just hours ago, this shop, her sanctuary, her inheritance from her mother, had been filled with the bright chatter of customers and the vibrant hues of spring blossoms. Now, the only color was the stark, crimson stain blooming on the worn, terracotta tiles behind the counter, her father's blood. The police had come and gone, their questions sharp and intrusive, their sympathy perfunctory. They had spoken of a robbery gone wrong, of a random act of violence. But Juliana knew better. Her father, Antonio DeLuca, hadn't been a wealthy man, but he had been a respected consigliere, a trusted advisor, to the less savory elements of Naples. He'd always been discreet, a ghost in the city's underbelly, but ghosts, she realized with a chilling certainty, could still be silenced. She knelt beside the stain, her fingers tracing its edges, the cold seeping into her bones. The police tape was a cruel, yellow barrier, a mockery of the life that had been spilled here. A single, perfect white lilac lay beside the stain, likely dislodged from a nearby arrangement during the struggle. She picked it up, its delicate fragrance strangely comforting amidst the metallic tang of blood. Juliana was 58, her life a tapestry woven with threads of quiet resilience. The lines around her eyes spoke of laughter and loss, of years spent raising her two children, Marco and Sofia, after her husband, Alessandro, had died in a car accident 20 years prior. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was pulled back in a severe bun, a reflection of the control she desperately clung to. She was a woman who had built walls around her heart, brick by brick, loss by loss. Now, those walls threatened to crumble. A shadow fell across the doorway, and Juliana looked up, her heart hammering against her ribs. A man stood silhouetted against the fading evening light, tall and imposing, his presence filling the small shop. He moved with a grace that belied his size, his dark eyes, the color of rich, aged balsamic vinegar, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Signora DeLuca," he said, his voice a low rumble, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. It was a voice accustomed to command, to obedience. She knew him, of course. Everyone in Naples knew Salvatore Costa. Il Leone, they called him the Lion, the head of the Costa family, one of the most powerful Camorra clans in the city. His reputation preceded him, a dark cloud of fear and respect. He was rumored to be ruthless, a man who ruled his empire with an iron fist and a cold heart. And yet, there was a weariness in his eyes, a hint of something softer hidden beneath the hardened exterior. He was impeccably dressed, his dark suit tailored to perfection, a stark contrast to the chaos of the shop. A faint scent of expensive cologne, something woody and subtly spiced, mingled with the lilies and the lingering metallic odor. He held a small, velvet box in his hand. "I came to offer my condolences," he said, his gaze sweeping over the scene, lingering on the bloodstain. "Your father was a valuable man. A loyal man." The words were carefully chosen, neutral, yet Juliana heard the unspoken message. Loyal to whom? Her father had always been careful, meticulous in his dealings. He had navigated the treacherous waters of the Neapolitan underworld with a skill that had kept him alive until now. "The police say it was a robbery," Juliana said, her voice surprisingly steady. She rose to her feet, clutching the lilac, her knuckles white. Salvatore Costa raised a dark eyebrow, a flicker of something that might have been amusement in his eyes. "Do you believe that, Signora?" She met his gaze, her own filled with a mixture of grief and defiance. "No." He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. Antonio was a man of certain connections. Connections that can be dangerous. He paused, his gaze locking with hers. He was also a man who made enemies. And you were one of them? Juliana challenged, the words escaping before she could stop them. A ghost of a smile played on his lips. Perhaps. But I am also a man who values loyalty. And I believe in protecting those who deserve it. He opened the velvet box, revealing a ring. It was a heavy, gold band, intricately carved with the Costa family crest, a roaring lion, its claws extended. Juliana stared at the ring, a cold dread creeping through her veins. She knew what this was. A proposal, of sorts, but not the kind born of love and affection. This was a bargain, a pact with the devil. Your father's death leaves a void, Signora, Salvatore continued, his voice softening slightly. A vulnerability. You are now exposed. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. I can offer you protection. The protection of the Costa family. But protection comes at a price. He held out the ring. You want protection? He murmured, his voice a silken whisper that sent shivers down her spine. Then you'll wear my ring. The lilac slipped from Juliana's grasp, falling to the floor, its pristine white petals brushing against the crimson stain. She looked from the ring to Salvatore's face, her mind reeling. She was trapped, caught between the grief of her father's death and the chilling proposition of the man who stood before her. Her life, her carefully constructed world, had shattered in a single, violent act. And now, she was being offered a choice, a terrifying, life-altering choice. To remain vulnerable, a target in the shadows, or to accept the protection of the lion, to bind herself to a world she had always feared. The scent of lilies, once a comfort, now felt like a suffocating shroud. And the whisper of his offer, like the promise, or the threat, of a storm. Chapter 2. A contract sealed in shadows. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant wail of a siren and the frantic hammering of Juliana's own heart. The ring, bathed in the dim light filtering through the shop's window, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the gold gleaming with an almost predatory allure. It represented everything she had spent her life avoiding: the darkness, the violence, the suffocating control of the Camorra. Yet it also represented safety, a shield against the unseen enemies who had taken her father. Why? The word escaped her lips, barely a whisper, raw with a confusion that went beyond the immediate shock. Why me? Salvatore Costa didn't answer immediately. He studied her, his dark eyes unreadable, assessing. It was a gaze that stripped away pretense, that saw beyond the carefully constructed facade of the grieving widow, the resilient mother. He saw, she suspected, the fear, but also the steel that had kept her standing through years of hardship. Your father, he finally said, his voice low and measured, was a man of secrets. Secrets that some would kill to possess. Secrets that you, Signora De Luca, may now unknowingly hold. Juliana's mind raced. Her father had always been secretive, compartmentalizing his life, keeping his work and his family separate. She had respected that, had even encouraged it, wanting to shield her children from the darkness that surrounded him. But now, that very secrecy threatened to consume her. I know nothing of his secrets, she said, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. Salvatore's lips curved in a slight, knowing smile. Perhaps. Or perhaps you know more than you realize. Either way, you are a target. Your father's enemies will not stop until they are certain those secrets are buried with him. He gestured towards the bloodstain on the floor. This was a message. A warning. The image of her father, lying lifeless on the floor, flashed through her mind, the pain a fresh, agonizing wave. She closed her eyes, fighting back the tears, the urge to collapse, to surrender to the despair that threatened to engulf her. What would be expected of me? She asked, her voice trembling, forcing herself to meet his gaze. He took a step closer, the subtle scent of his cologne a sharp, almost invasive presence in the small, flower-filled space. Loyalty, he said, his voice a soft, seductive murmur. Discretion. And companionship. The last word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Juliana felt a shiver run down her spine.
Companionship.
It was a euphemism. She knew, a veil over the true nature of their arrangement. She would be his wife in name, a symbol of his power, a pawn in his intricate game. But she would also be under his protection, shielded from the wolves circling in the shadows. She thought of Marco, her son, impulsive and hot-headed, already showing signs of wanting to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. She thought of Sophia, her daughter, gentle and artistic, so vulnerable to the harsh realities of the world. They were her reason for living, her reason for enduring. And they were the reason she couldn't refuse. "I have children," she said, the words a plea, a desperate attempt to hold onto some semblance of her former life. Salvatore nodded, his expression unchanging. "I am aware. They will be protected as well. Under my roof, they will be safe." His roof. His protection. His control. The words were like gilded cages, offering security at the price of freedom. But what choice did she have? To refuse was to condemn herself and her children to a life of fear, of constantly looking over their shoulders, waiting for the next attack. She looked at the ring again, the lion's head staring back at her, a symbol of power and dominance. It was a symbol of everything she despised, yet it was also the key to her survival. Taking a deep breath, she held out her hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "I accept," she said, the words feeling like a betrayal of everything she had ever believed in, yet also a desperate affirmation of her will to survive, to protect her children. Salvatore's eyes flickered with something that might have been satisfaction, or perhaps even relief. He took her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle, his fingers strong and calloused. He slid the ring onto her finger, the gold cold against her skin. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. As if she had always been destined to wear it. "Welcome to the family, Signora Costa," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent a strange, unsettling thrill through her. The moment the ring settled on her finger, the air in the shop seemed to shift, to become heavier, charged with an unspoken energy. The scent of lilies, once overpowering, now seemed to fade, replaced by the subtle, musky scent of Salvatore's cologne, a constant reminder of the bargain she had made. The contract was sealed, not in ink, but in blood and shadows. And Juliana De Luca, the quiet florist, the grieving widow, was now Juliana Costa, wife of the Lion of Naples, bound to a world of secrets, danger, and a love she could not yet comprehend. The wail of the siren in the distance seemed to echo the silent scream trapped within her heart. Chapter 3. The weight of a Costa ring. The drive to the Costa estate was a blur. Juliana sat beside Salvatore in the back of a sleek, black car, the city lights of Naples a shimmering, distorted landscape through the tinted windows. She was acutely aware of the weight of the ring on her finger, the cold metal a constant reminder of the life she had left behind, the future she had been thrust into. Salvatore was silent, his profile a sharp silhouette against the passing lights. He didn't attempt to comfort her, didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply existed, a powerful, enigmatic presence beside her, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation. She appreciated that in a strange way. It was more honest than false sympathy. The Costa estate, the Palazzo Costa, was a sprawling, imposing structure perched on a hill overlooking the Bay of Naples. It was a fortress, a testament to generations of power and wealth, its ancient stone walls illuminated by strategically placed spotlights, casting long, dramatic shadows. As the car passed through the wrought iron gates, Juliana felt a sense of unease, a feeling of entering a different world, a world governed by its own rules, its own laws. Two men, large and imposing, their faces expressionless, opened the car doors. They were dressed in dark suits, their movements precise and efficient, their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. They were Salvatore's guards, his protectors, and now, by extension, hers. Salvatore stepped out of the car, extending a hand to Juliana. She took it, his touch firm and reassuring, and stepped onto the cobblestone driveway. The air was cooler here, the scent of the sea mingling with the fragrance of jasmine and lemon trees that lined the long, winding drive. The palazzo's interior was even more opulent than its exterior suggested. Vast, high-ceilinged rooms were adorned with priceless artwork, antique furniture, and shimmering chandeliers. The floors were polished marble, reflecting the light, creating an illusion of endless space. It was beautiful, breathtaking even, but it felt cold, impersonal, a museum rather than a home. A woman, her face carefully composed, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, awaited them in the grand foyer. She was dressed in a simple, black dress, her only adornment a silver crucifix that hung around her neck. "Don Salvatore," she said, her voice crisp and respectful, her eyes briefly flicking to Juliana.
"Signora."
"This is Emilia," Salvatore said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "She is the housekeeper. She will see to your needs." Emilia bowed her head slightly. "If the signora will follow me, I will show you to your rooms." Juliana followed Emilia through a maze of corridors, her footsteps echoing on the marble floors. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional muffled sound from distant parts of the palazzo. She felt a growing sense of isolation, a feeling of being a stranger in a strange land. Her rooms were located in the east wing of the palazzo, overlooking the gardens and the bay. They were lavishly decorated, a suite consisting of a bedroom, a sitting room, and a large, marble bathroom. But despite the opulence, they felt sterile, devoid of any personal touch. "Dinner will be served in 1 hour," Emilia said, her voice flat and emotionless. "The Don prefers to dine promptly at 8. Juliana nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She had barely eaten all day, her appetite lost in the whirlwind of grief and fear. The thought of sitting across from Salvatore Costa, of navigating the unspoken rules of his world, was daunting. Emilia left, closing the door softly behind her. Juliana stood in the center of the room, feeling utterly lost. She walked over to the window, looking out at the breathtaking view. The Bay of Naples shimmered under the moonlight, the lights of the city twinkling like fallen stars. It was a scene of serene beauty, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within her. She touched the ring on her finger, the cold metal a tangible link to her new reality. She was Juliana Costa now, the wife of a powerful, dangerous man, a woman living in a gilded cage. But she was also a mother, a survivor. And she would find a way to navigate this new world, to protect her children, to find her own place within the walls of the Palazzo Costa. She had to. Her father's legacy, her children's future, and her own survival depended on it. The weight of the ring was heavy, but she would learn to bear it. She would learn to be strong, to be cunning, to be a Costa. A distant church bell chimed, the sound both mournful and resolute, a fitting soundtrack to her new, uncertain life. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Palazzo. The hour before dinner felt like an eternity. Juliana wandered through the opulent, yet strangely impersonal, rooms assigned to her, trying to find some semblance of comfort, some connection to her former life. She found none. The clothes hanging in the vast walk-in closet were not hers, they were elegant, expensive dresses, chosen, she assumed, by Emilia or perhaps even by Salvatore himself. They were clothes meant for a donna, a woman of power and status, not for a simple florist who preferred comfortable jeans and sweaters. She chose a simple, black dress, its fabric soft and flowing. It felt alien against her skin, a costume for a role she was still struggling to understand. She brushed her hair, leaving it loose around her shoulders, a small act of defiance against the rigid formality of her surroundings. She avoided looking at her reflection in the mirror, afraid of what she might see a stranger staring back at her, a woman lost in a world she didn't belong in. As she made her way to the dining room, guided by Emilia's earlier instructions, she heard whispers. The palazzo was not silent, as she had initially thought. It was alive with hushed conversations, with the rustle of silk, the click of heels on marble, the faint clinking of silverware. She passed servants, their eyes downcast, their movements quick and efficient. They seemed to avoid her gaze, as if she were an apparition, a ghost in their well-ordered world. The dining room was vast, dominated by a long, mahogany table that could easily seat 20 people. Only 2 places were set, one at each end. Salvatore was already there, standing by the window, gazing out at the darkening sky. He turned as she entered, his dark eyes assessing her from head to toe. He didn't smile, but there was a flicker of something in his expression, perhaps approval, perhaps simply acknowledgement. "You look appropriate," he said, his voice neutral. Juliana felt a flush creep up her cheeks. She wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a criticism. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. He gestured towards the table. "Please sit." She took her place at the opposite end, the distance between them feeling vast and symbolic. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the soft ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner of the room. Servants, their movements silent and unobtrusive, began to serve the meal. Course after course appeared, each dish exquisitely prepared, a testament to the palazzo's culinary resources. But Juliana had little appetite. She picked at the food, her mind racing, trying to decipher the unspoken rules of this strange, new world. "Tell me about your children," Salvatore said, his voice breaking the silence. Juliana looked up, surprised. It was the first personal question he had asked her. "Marco is 25, she said, her voice gaining a little strength. He works at a mechanic shop. He loves cars." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "He can be impulsive." Salvatore nodded, his expression unchanging. "And Sophia?" "Sophia is 22. She's an artist. She sees beauty in everything." Juliana's voice softened as she spoke of her daughter, a faint smile touching her lips. "They are fortunate to have you," Salvatore said, his gaze holding hers. The words, simple as they were, surprised her. She had expected coldness, indifference, perhaps even disdain. But there was a sincerity in his voice, a hint of something deeper than the calculating Dawn she had expected. "I would do anything for them," she replied, her voice firm, her eyes meeting his without flinching. He nodded again, a slow, deliberate movement. "I understand. Family is everything." The word family hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It was the cornerstone of the Camorra, the foundation of their power, their loyalty, their code. And now, she was a part of that family, bound to it by a ring and a bargain. The rest of the meal passed in relative silence, punctuated by brief, formal exchanges. Juliana learned little about Salvatore, but she sensed a complexity beneath his stoic exterior. He was a man of few words, but his eyes spoke volumes. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much, who had borne the weight of responsibility, of power, of darkness. As the servants cleared the table, Salvatore rose. "Come," he said. "I will show you the gardens." Juliana followed him out of the dining room and onto a large terrace that overlooked the sprawling gardens. The air was cool and fragrant, the scent of jasmine and roses mingling with the salty tang of the sea. The gardens were a labyrinth of pathways, fountains, and statues, bathed in the soft glow of strategically placed lights. They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath their feet. Juliana felt a strange sense of peace settle over her, a momentary respite from the anxiety and fear that had been her constant companions. "Your father," Salvatore said, his voice low, breaking the silence, "spoke of you often. He was proud of you." Juliana stopped, her heart aching at the mention of her father. He never said much," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. Salvatore turned to face her, his expression softening slightly. "Some men find it difficult to express their feelings," he said. "But that does not mean they do not feel them." He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. It was a brief, unexpected gesture, a spark of warmth in the cold, formal world of the palazzo. Juliana looked up at him, her eyes searching his. She saw a flicker of something there, something that went beyond the ruthless dawn, something that hinted at vulnerability, at loneliness, at a longing for connection. And in that moment, She realized that the whispers in the palazzo were not just about her. They were about him, too. The Lion of Naples, the feared and respected Don, was also a man carrying his own burdens, his own secrets, his own hidden wounds. The weight of the ring on her finger suddenly felt less heavy, replaced by a flicker of something else, something unexpected, something that felt dangerously close to understanding. The distant sound of the waves crashing against the shore seemed to mirror the turbulent emotions swirling within her. Chapter 5. Echoes of a Father's Legacy. The days that followed settled into a strange, unsettling routine. Juliana spent her mornings exploring the palazzo and its grounds, trying to familiarize herself with her new surroundings. The vastness of the estate was both impressive and isolating. She often found herself lost in the labyrinthine corridors, encountering servants who would quickly avert their eyes and disappear like shadows. She tried to reach out to Marco and Sofia, but her calls were brief and strained. Marco was wary, suspicious of Salvatore and the entire situation. Sofia, ever the optimist, tried to reassure her, but Juliana could hear the underlying anxiety in her voice. They were worried about her, and she couldn't blame them. She was worried about herself. The only person she had any real interaction with was Emilia, the housekeeper. Emilia was a woman of few words, but her eyes were sharp and observant. She seemed to know everything that went on within the palazzo walls, a silent guardian of its secrets. Juliana sensed a guarded kindness beneath Emilia's stoic exterior, a hint of empathy that offered a small measure of comfort. One morning, while exploring the palazzo's library, a vast, high-ceilinged room filled with leather-bound books, Juliana stumbled upon a section dedicated to Neapolitan history. She was drawn to a volume detailing the history of the Camorra, its origins, its evolution, its intricate web of families and alliances. As she read, she began to understand the complex, deeply rooted culture she had been thrust into. It was a world of ancient codes, of honor and betrayal, of loyalty and revenge. A world where blood was thicker than water, and where family was everything. She also found several books that had belonged to her father. They were on subjects ranging from philosophy to poetry, with his handwritten notes in the margins. Seeing his familiar handwriting, his insightful observations, brought a fresh wave of grief, but also a sense of connection. She realized that she had never truly known her father, that he had kept a large part of himself hidden from her. In one of the books, a collection of Neapolitan folk tales, she found a pressed flower, a single, dried lilac. It was identical to the one she had found beside her father's bloodstain in the florist shop. Her heart skipped a beat. It was a message, she realized, a clue. But to what? She carefully examined the book, turning the pages slowly, searching for any other hidden signs. And then she found it. A small, folded piece of paper tucked into the spine. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. It was a letter, written in her father's handwriting, addressed to her. Mia cara Juliana, it began. My dear Juliana, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. And it means you are in danger. Juliana's breath caught in her throat. She continued to read, her heart pounding in her chest. There are things I have never told you, secrets I have kept to protect you. But now, those secrets are threatening your life. The cost of family, they are not what they seem. Salvatore, he is a dangerous man. But he is also a man of honor in his own way. Trust your instincts. Be wary of everyone. And remember, the lilacs always bloom in the spring. The letter ended abruptly, leaving Juliana with more questions than answers. The lilacs always bloom in the spring. What did it mean? Was it a code, a password, a reference to something she should know? She reread the letter several times, trying to decipher its hidden meaning. She felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling that she was caught in a web of deceit, that she couldn't trust anyone. Even Salvatore. Especially Salvatore. That evening during dinner, she studied him carefully. He was, as always, impeccably dressed, his demeanor calm and controlled. He spoke of mundane things, of business dealings, of the challenges of running the Costa family. But Juliana couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something, that he knew more than he was letting on. My father, she said, her voice trembling slightly. He kept secrets. From me. From everyone. Salvatore looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. All men have secrets, Signora, he replied. But his secrets, they got him killed, she said, her voice rising. And now they're threatening me. He didn't deny it. He simply met her gaze, his expression unwavering. I am protecting you, he said. From whom? She challenged. From your enemies? Or from you? A flicker of something anger, perhaps, or surprise crossed his face. I made a promise, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I will keep it. But Juliana was no longer sure. Her father's letter had planted a seed of doubt, a suspicion that she was being manipulated, used as a pawn in a game she didn't understand. The echoes of her father's legacy were growing louder, and they were warning her to be careful, to trust no one. The weight of the Costa ring felt heavier than ever, a symbol not of protection, but of entrapment. As she looked across the table at Salvatore, she saw not a protector, but a potential enemy, a man shrouded in secrets, a man who might hold the key to her father's death and to her own fate. The faint scent of his cologne, once a subtle intrusion, now felt like a suffocating presence, a constant reminder of the danger that surrounded her. Chapter 6. The Serpent's Gentle Gaze. The days following the discovery of her father's letter were filled with a growing sense of unease. Juliana found herself constantly on edge, her senses heightened, searching for clues, for any sign of the danger her father had warned her about. She started having nightmares, vivid dreams filled with shadows and whispers, with the recurring image of a single, white lilac stained with blood. She tried to talk to Marco and Sofia again, but the conversations were even more strained than before. Marco was increasingly agitated, demanding that she leave the palazzo, convinced that Salvatore was responsible for their father's death. Sofia, while more subdued, expressed her growing concern for Juliana's safety. Juliana felt torn, wanting to protect her children, but also feeling trapped by her commitment to Salvatore, by the fear of what might happen if she broke her bargain. She spent hours in the library, poring over her father's books, searching for any further clues, any hint of the meaning behind his cryptic message. She reread the letter countless times, the words "the lilacs always bloom in the spring" echoing in her mind. She researched lilacs, their symbolism, their significance in Neapolitan culture. But she found nothing that seemed to connect to her father's warning. She also began to observe Salvatore more closely, watching his interactions with his men, listening to his conversations, trying to decipher the unspoken language of the Camorra. She noticed the subtle gestures, the coded phrases, the undercurrent of tension that always seemed to be present. She realized that he was constantly surrounded by danger, by rivals who would gladly see him dead. And she was now a part of that world, a target by association. One evening, she found him in the gardens, standing by a fountain, gazing at the moonlit water. He seemed lost in thought, his usual air of command replaced by a weariness that resonated with her own. She approached him cautiously, her footsteps barely disturbing the stillness of the night. He turned, his dark eyes meeting hers. I can't sleep, she said, the words a simple statement of fact, but also an unspoken plea for understanding. He nodded, his expression softening slightly. The palazzo, it can be a restless place, he said. They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the gentle splashing of the fountain. My father, Juliana said, her voice trembling, he warned me about you. Salvatore didn't flinch. He simply met her gaze, his expression unreadable. And what did he say? He said you were dangerous, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. But that you were also a man of honor. A flicker of something amusement, perhaps, or sadness crossed his face. Your father was a wise man, he said. He understood the complexities of life. He also said to trust my instincts, she continued, her eyes searching his. And my instincts, they're telling me to be afraid. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming, yet strangely comforting. Fear is a natural instinct, he said, his voice low and soothing. It keeps us alive. But fear can also be a weapon. He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. It was a gesture of intimacy, of tenderness, that belied the darkness that surrounded him. Juliana felt a shiver run down her spine, a mixture of fear and something else, something she couldn't quite define. "I will not lie to you, Juliana," he said, his voice a soft murmur. "There is danger. There are enemies. But I will protect you. I gave my word." His gaze held hers, and for a moment, she saw something in his eyes that went beyond the ruthless Dawn, beyond the cold, calculating leader of the Costa family. She saw a vulnerability, a loneliness, a hint of the man he might have been, before the weight of his responsibilities had hardened him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, the words a desperate plea for understanding. "Why me?" He hesitated, his gaze shifting away from hers, as if he were struggling with his own secrets. "Your father, he saved my life, many years ago," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "I owe him a debt I can never repay." He looked back at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "And you remind me of someone I once knew. Someone I lost." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Juliana felt a sudden, unexpected surge of empathy for this man, this serpent with a gentle gaze. She realized that he was not simply a monster, as she had initially believed. He was a complex, flawed human being, shaped by his past, trapped by his circumstances, just like her. The weight of his gaze, the subtle warmth of his hand on her cheek, made her question everything. The serpent she feared had a gentle gaze, and for the first time, she wondered if the danger lay not in him, but in the world that had made him what he was. The distant sound of a nightingale's song seemed to echo the conflicting emotions swirling within her: fear, desire, and a growing, unsettling sense of connection. Chapter 7. Beneath the Neapolitan Moon. The encounter in the garden left Juliana with a sense of profound unease, mingled with a flicker of something she hadn't expected: curiosity. Salvatore's admission of a past debt to her father, his cryptic reference to someone he had lost, had opened a door to a part of him he usually kept carefully guarded. She found herself wanting to know more, to understand the man behind the mask of the ruthless Dawn. She began to observe him even more closely, not with suspicion, but with a genuine desire to understand. She noticed the small details: the way he would unconsciously touch the scar above his left eyebrow when he was deep in thought, the way his eyes would soften when he spoke of his late mother, the way he would sometimes stand by the window, gazing out at the city, a hint of melancholy in his expression. She also started to spend more time in the gardens, drawn to the tranquility, the sense of peace she found there. It was a refuge from the stifling atmosphere of the palazzo, from the whispers and the secrets. She would often find Salvatore there, too, either working with the gardeners or simply sitting by the fountain, lost in his own thoughts. One evening, as she was walking through the rose garden, she found him pruning a bush of vibrant red roses. He looked up as she approached, a faint smile touching his lips. "They remind me of her," he said, gesturing towards the roses. "My mother. She loved red roses." Juliana sat down on a nearby bench, watching him as he worked. "Tell me about her," she said softly. He hesitated for a moment, then put down his pruning shears and sat down beside her. "She was the heart of our family," he said, his voice filled with a tenderness she hadn't heard before. "She was strong, resilient, but also gentle. She taught me everything I know about loyalty, about family." He spoke of his childhood, of growing up in the shadow of his father, a powerful and demanding Dawn. He spoke of the pressure he had felt to follow in his father's footsteps, to take on the responsibilities of the Costa family. He spoke of the sacrifices he had made, the choices he had been forced to make. As he spoke, Juliana began to understand the weight of his burden, the loneliness of his position. He was a man trapped by his birthright, by the expectations of his family, by the demands of the Camorra. He had never had the freedom to choose his own path, to live his own life. "And the woman, the one you lost?" Juliana asked, her voice hesitant. His expression darkened, his eyes clouded with pain. "Her name was Isabella," he said, his voice barely a whisper. She was everything to me. We were to be married. He paused, his gaze drifting towards the distant horizon. She was killed caught in the crossfire of a feud between our family and the Russo family. He closed his fist until the knuckles were pale. Juliana felt a surge of empathy for him. She understood loss, the agonizing pain of losing someone you loved. She saw in his eyes the reflection of her own grief, her own loss. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He looked at her, his gaze intense. "It was a long time ago," he said. "But the pain, it never truly goes away." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the gentle rustling of the leaves in the breeze. The moon was full, casting a silvery glow over the gardens, bathing them in an ethereal light. "The lilacs," Juliana said, breaking the silence. "My father, he left me a message. He said the lilacs always bloom in the spring." Salvatore looked at her, his expression shifting, a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher crossing his face. "Your father, he had a way with words," he said. "He was a poet in his own way." "But what does it mean?" she persisted. He hesitated, his gaze searching hers.
"It could mean many things," he said.
"It could be a reference to a place,
"A time."
a person." He stood up, his movements fluid and graceful. "Come," he said. "I will show you something." He led her through the gardens to a small, secluded area hidden behind a wall of flowering jasmine. In the center of the area was a small, stone fountain, and beside it, a single lilac bush, its branches bare, waiting for the spring. "This was Isabella's favorite place," he said, his voice soft. "She planted this lilac bush herself." Juliana looked at the bush, her heart beating faster. She understood now. The lilacs were not just a symbol of spring, of rebirth. They were a symbol of love, of loss, of memory. They were a connection to Isabella, to Salvatore's past, to her father's secret. "My father, he knew Isabella?" she asked.
Salvatore nodded.
"They were friends," he said. "He helped us when we were in danger." He turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and regret. "Your father was a good man, Juliana," he said. "He risked his life for us."
"For me."
"For Isabella." The moonlight highlighted the sadness in his face as he stood beneath the Neapolitan moon, exposing a piece of his broken heart. He was showing Juliana another piece of the puzzle, another reason why she was wearing his ring under his protection. But as the pieces came together, Juliana wondered if they were forming a picture of safety or one of intricate and deeply rooted danger. The gentle breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine, a bittersweet reminder of the secrets that still lay hidden beneath the surface. Chapter 8. Masks and Mirrored Truths. The revelation in the garden created a shift in Juliana's relationship with Salvatore. The wall of formality between them began to crumble, replaced by a tentative understanding, a shared sense of grief and loss. They started to spend more time together, talking, sharing stories, finding solace in each other's company. Juliana learned more about Salvatore's past, about the events that had shaped him, that had turned him into the man he was. She learned about the constant pressure he was under, the threats he faced, the betrayals he had endured. She saw the toll it had taken on him, the weariness in his eyes, the cynicism that masked a deep-seated vulnerability. She also began to see a different side of him, a side he rarely showed to the outside world. She saw his kindness, his generosity, his loyalty to those he cared about. She saw his love for his family, his dedication to protecting them, even at the cost of his own happiness. One evening, as they were having dinner, Salvatore surprised her by asking about her life before her father's death, about her florist shop, about her dreams. "I always wanted to travel," she said, a wistful smile touching her lips. "To see the world. But life had other plans." "It's not too late," he said, his gaze holding hers. "You are still a young woman, Juliana." His words surprised her. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to dream, to hope for something more. She had been so focused on survival, on protecting her children, that she had neglected her own desires, her own needs. "I don't know," she said, her voice hesitant. "It feels selfish." "It is not selfish to want happiness," he said, his voice firm. to want a life of your own. His words resonated with her, awakening a longing she had long suppressed. She realized that she had been living in the shadows, defined by her roles as a wife, a mother, a widow. She had forgotten who she was, what she wanted. That night, she had another dream. This time it was different. She was in the gardens, surrounded by blooming lilacs, their fragrance intoxicating. She saw Isabella, a beautiful woman with long, dark hair and kind eyes. Isabella smiled at her, and then she pointed towards Salvatore, who was standing in the distance, his back to her. Juliana woke up with a start, her heart pounding. The dream felt significant, a message, a sign. She realized that she was not just living in Salvatore's world, she was living in Isabella's shadow. And she was starting to feel something for Salvatore, something that went beyond gratitude, beyond respect. Something that felt dangerously close to love. The next day, she decided to visit her florist shop. It had been closed since her father's death, and she needed to see it, to reconnect with that part of her life. She asked Emilia to arrange for a car, and to her surprise, Salvatore offered to accompany her. The shop was exactly as she had left it, dusty and silent, the flowers wilted and dead. The scent of decay mingled with the lingering fragrance of lilies, a poignant reminder of the life that had been lost. Juliana walked through the shop, touching the familiar objects, the vases, the ribbons, the tools of her trade. She felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of peace. This was her sanctuary, her creation, a place where she had found solace and purpose. Salvatore watched her, his expression unreadable. "You love this place," he said. "Yes," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "It was my escape, my passion. Will you reopen it?" he asked. She hesitated. She hadn't thought about it. She had been so focused on surviving, on navigating her new life, that she hadn't considered the possibility of returning to her old one. "I don't know," she said. I need time to think." As she stood there, the realization washed over her, that her life could change, that her passions might still live. It was a mirror held up, showing her what she thought was lost. They returned to the palazzo in silence. Juliana felt a renewed sense of determination. She would not let her father's death, or her marriage to Salvatore, define her. She would find a way to reclaim her life, to pursue her dreams, to be more than just the Donna of the Costa family. She realized she had been looking at masks, at Salvatore, at herself, and finding the real person was becoming clearer, with every mirrored truth. But as she looked at Salvatore, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a possessiveness, a warning. He was a man accustomed to control, to power. And she was starting to realize that her desire for independence, for a life of her own, might be a threat to him, a challenge to his authority. The weight of the Costa ring felt heavy again, a reminder of the bargain she had made, the price she had agreed to pay. The scent of lilies, once a comfort, now felt like a subtle, persistent threat. Chapter 9. The Lioness in the Lion's Den. The decision to revisit the florist shop had stirred something within Juliana, a yearning for independence, a desire to reclaim a part of herself she thought she had lost. She started to spend more time in the shop, cleaning, organizing, slowly bringing it back to life. She found solace in the familiar routine, in the scent of the flowers, in the creative process of arranging bouquets. Salvatore, to her surprise, didn't object. He seemed to understand her need for a space of her own, a connection to her past. He even offered to help, providing her with resources, with contacts, with anything she needed to reopen the shop. But Juliana sensed a subtle tension beneath his supportive facade. He was a man accustomed to control, and her growing independence was a challenge to that control, a subtle shift in the power dynamic between them. She also started to take a more active role in the running of the palazzo. She met with the staff, learned about their duties, their concerns. She discovered that Emilia, the stoic housekeeper, was a wealth of information, a keen observer of the intricate workings of the Costa household. Emilia, initially reserved, gradually warmed to Juliana, sensing her genuine desire to understand, to make a difference. Juliana also began to attend social events with Salvatore, meeting other members of the Camorra, their wives, their families. She quickly realized that she was an object of curiosity, of scrutiny. She was the new Donna, the outsider who had married the Lion of Naples. She had to navigate a complex web of alliances, of rivalries, of unspoken rules. She learned to play the role expected of her, to be gracious, to be charming, to be deferential to Salvatore. But she also started to assert herself, to express her opinions, to challenge the status quo. She realized that she had a voice, a power, that she could use to influence events, to make a difference. One evening, at a lavish dinner party hosted by one of Salvatore's allies, Juliana found herself engaged in a conversation with several other Don. They were discussing the upcoming election for the local council, a position that held significant influence over the city's affairs. "It's a shame," one of the women said, "that we have no say in these matters. It's all decided by the men." Juliana saw an opportunity. "Perhaps," she said, her voice calm and measured, "we could influence our husbands. We could persuade them to support a candidate who is sympathetic to our concerns." The other women looked at her, surprised. It was an unconventional suggestion, a challenge to the traditional patriarchal structure of the Camorra. "And who might that candidate be?" another woman asked, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Juliana smiled. "I have someone in mind," she said. "Someone who is honest. Someone who cares about the community." She had been secretly researching the candidates, and she had found one who seemed genuinely committed to improving the lives of the people of Naples, a man who was not beholden to the Camorra. She knew it was a risky move, a challenge to Salvatore's authority, but she felt it was the right thing to do. When she told Salvatore about her plan, he was initially resistant. "Politics is a dangerous game, Juliana," he said. "It's best to stay out of it." "But we can make a difference," she insisted. "We can use our influence for good." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. "You are a formidable woman, Juliana," he said. "You remind me more and more of Isabella." The comparison, while meant as a compliment, sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't want to be like Isabella, a woman who had died because of the Camorra. She wanted to be herself, to forge her own path, to make her own choices. "I am not Isabella," she said, her voice firm. "I am Juliana, and I will do what I believe is right." Salvatore studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. "Very well," he said. "But be careful. You're playing with fire." Juliana knew he was right. She was stepping into a dangerous world, a world of power and intrigue, where one wrong move could have devastating consequences. She was the lioness, stepping into the lion's den, and testing how far she could go before the lion roared. The challenges were risky, but she found her strength and a voice. She was no longer just the grieving widow, or the Don's wife. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with, a woman who was not afraid to challenge the status quo, to fight for what she believed in. The scent of the flowers in the palazzo seemed to bloom brighter, their fragrance a symbol of her growing strength, her determination to carve her own destiny within the walls of the Costa Empire. Chapter 10. A Dance with Deception. Juliana's foray into the political arena proved to be more challenging than she had anticipated. She encountered resistance not only from Salvatore's allies, but also from some of the other Don, who were wary of her unconventional methods and her growing influence. She realized that she was walking a tightrope, balancing her desire for change with the need to maintain her position within the Costa family. She continued to work on reopening her florist shop, finding solace in the familiar routine, in the creative process of bringing beauty into the world. The shop became her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the pressures of the palazzo, where she could be herself, Juliana De Luca, the florist, not Juliana Costa, the Donna. She also continued to explore her father's legacy, searching for the meaning behind his cryptic message. She revisited the lilac bush in the garden, examining it closely, hoping to find some clue, some hidden connection. She discovered that the bush was a rare variety, a hybrid created by a renowned Neapolitan botanist, a man who had been a close friend of her father's. She decided to visit the botanist's estate, now a museum, hoping to learn more about the lilac, about its origins, about its significance. The museum was located on the outskirts of Naples, a sprawling, elegant villa surrounded by lush gardens. As she wandered through the exhibits, she found a display dedicated to the botanist's work, including a detailed description of the lilac hybrid he had created. And then she saw it, a small, faded photograph of the botanist with her father and another man, a man she recognized.
Salvatore Costa.
But a much younger Salvatore, his face unlined, his eyes filled with a youthful idealism that was absent from the man she knew. Beneath the photograph was a caption, Professor Lorenzo, Antonio De Luca, and Salvatore Costa, celebrating the creation of the Isabella Lilac, 1988. Juliana's heart skipped a beat. The Isabella Lilac. It was named after Salvatore's lost love, and her father had been involved in its creation. It was another piece of the puzzle, a connection between her father, Salvatore, and Isabella. She realized that her father's message, the lilacs always bloom in the spring, was not just a reference to the flower itself, but to a specific time, a specific event. The spring of 1988. The year Isabella died. She left the museum with a growing sense of unease. She knew that she was close to uncovering the truth, but she also knew that the truth could be dangerous. She was dancing with deception, and every step brought her closer to a revelation that could shatter everything she believed. That evening, she confronted Salvatore. "I went to the botanist's museum," she said, her voice steady. "I saw the photograph. You, my father, and Professor Lorenzo. With the Isabella lilac." Salvatore's expression hardened, his eyes clouded with a mixture of anger and regret. "That was a long time ago," he said. "Tell me," she insisted. "Tell me about Isabella. Tell me about her death." He hesitated, his gaze shifting away from hers. He walked over to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "It was a mistake," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "A tragic mistake." He turned back to face her, his eyes filled with pain. "There was a feud between our family and the Russo family. Isabella, she was caught in the crossfire. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But there's more to it, isn't there?" Juliana pressed.
My father, he knew something. He was involved.
Salvatore's jaw tightened. "Your father, he tried to help," he said. "He tried to warn us. But it was too late." He took a deep breath, his gaze holding hers. "There was a betrayal," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Someone within our family, someone close to me leaked information to the Russos. They knew where Isabella would be. They set a trap." Juliana felt a chill run down her spine. A betrayal. Within the Costa family. It was a revelation that shook her to her core. The dance she was involved in became deadly, and she was unsure which steps would lead to safety, and which steps might lead to death. "Who?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper.
Who betrayed you?
Salvatore's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable.
I don't know, he said.
"But I will find out. And when I do, they will pay." The promise was filled with ice, but she still felt the simmering threat of a fire below the surface. He seemed to answer her truthfully, yet she could not shake the feeling that he kept a mask firmly in place. Chapter 11. The Price of Protection. The revelation of a betrayal within the Costa family cast a long shadow over the palazzo. The atmosphere became even more tense, more guarded. Juliana found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering who she could trust, who might be hiding a deadly secret. Salvatore became increasingly withdrawn, consumed by his quest for revenge. He spent hours in his study, poring over documents, meeting with his lieutenants, his face a mask of cold determination. He seemed to have retreated into a world of darkness, a world she couldn't reach. Juliana felt increasingly isolated, trapped between her growing feelings for Salvatore and her fear of the world he inhabited. She missed her old life, her simple existence as a florist, her freedom from the constant threat of violence. She continued to work on reopening her shop, finding solace in the familiar routine, in the beauty of the flowers. She hired a young woman, Sophia, a distant relative of Emilia's, to help her. Sophia was eager to learn, and Juliana found a sense of purpose in teaching her, in sharing her knowledge and her passion. One afternoon, as she was arranging a bouquet of lilies, Marco visited her at the shop. He was agitated, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and concern. "You have to get out of there, Mama," he said, his voice urgent. "That place, it's not safe. That man, he's dangerous." Juliana tried to reassure him, but she couldn't deny the truth in his words. She knew that Salvatore was capable of great violence, that he lived by a code that was foreign to her. "I made a promise," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't just leave." "A promise to a murderer?"
Marco Chaligny.
"He killed Papa, Mama." "I know it." Juliana shook her head. She didn't believe that Salvatore had killed her father. She had seen the genuine grief in his eyes, the guilt he carried over Isabella's death. She believed that he was telling the truth, at least about that. But she knew where Marco was coming from, and that it was rooted in love and loss. "I don't know who killed Papa," she said. "But I will find out. I promise you that." Marco looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "Just be careful, Mama," he said.
"Please."
He left, leaving Juliana with a renewed sense of determination. She would find out the truth about her father's death, about the betrayal within the Costa family. And she would protect her children, even if it meant risking her own life. That evening, she decided to confront Salvatore again. She found him in his study, surrounded by papers, his face illuminated by the harsh glow of a desk lamp. "I need to know more," she said, her voice firm. "About the betrayal. About Isabella's death." He looked up at her, his eyes tired and wary. "Why, Juliana?" he asked. "Why do you keep digging? Some things are best left buried." "Because it's my life, too," she replied. "My father's death, it's connected to all of this. I deserve to know the truth." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The truth is complicated," he said. "It's not always what we want it to be."
"Tell me," she insisted.
"Tell me everything." He hesitated, then began to speak. He told her about the feud with the Russo family, about the years of violence, of bloodshed. He told her about Isabella, about their love, about their plans for the future. He told her about the day she died, about the trap that had been set, about the devastating loss he had suffered. He also told her about the suspicions he had, the names of those he believed might be responsible for the betrayal. They were names of men close to him, men he had trusted, men who held positions of power within the Costa family. As he spoke, Juliana realized the full extent of the danger she was in. She was living in a world of lies, of deceit, where loyalty was a fragile thing, where betrayal could come from anywhere. The price of protection was high, it seemed. The ring she wore was more a tether than a shield, binding her to the shadows of Naples' underworld. "I need your help," Salvatore said, his voice low. "I need someone I can trust. Someone who can see things I might miss." Juliana looked at him, her heart pounding. He was asking her to become his confidant, his ally, in his quest for revenge. It was a dangerous game, a deadly game. But she couldn't refuse. She had come too far. She had invested too much. And she had, against all odds, fallen in love with this man, this dangerous, complex, broken man. "I will help you," she said, the truth ringing out clearly. She was no longer afraid. She had found a purpose. And his dark request felt like the first time she had been truly needed in this new and dangerous world. The air in the study felt thick with unspoken emotions, with the weight of secrets, with the promise of danger. The scent of the lilies she had brought from the shop, a subtle reminder of her past, mingled with the heavy aroma of Salvatore's cologne, a symbol of her present, of the uncertain future that lay ahead. Chapter 12. Cracks in the Foundation. With Juliana's agreement to help, a new dynamic emerged between her and Salvatore. They became partners, working together to uncover the truth behind Isabella's death and the betrayal within the Costa family. They spent hours poring over documents, analyzing old photographs, piecing together fragments of information. Juliana discovered a talent for investigation, a keen eye for detail, an ability to see connections that Salvatore, blinded by his own grief and anger, had missed. She used her connections in the city, her knowledge of the Neapolitan underworld, to gather information, to discreetly question people who might have knowledge of the past. She also started to attend meetings with Salvatore and his lieutenants, observing their interactions, listening to their conversations, trying to identify any signs of suspicion, any hint of disloyalty. She realized that the Costa family was not a monolithic entity, as she had initially believed. It was a complex web of alliances and rivalries, with factions vying for power, with secrets hidden beneath a veneer of unity. One name kept surfacing in her investigations: Riccardo Bellini. Bellini was Salvatore's cousin, a man he had grown up with, a man he had trusted implicitly. Bellini held a high position within the Costa family, overseeing their legitimate businesses, their investments, their connections to the political establishment. He was a smooth operator, charming and charismatic, but Juliana sensed a coldness beneath his polished exterior, a ruthlessness that belied his affable demeanor. She noticed that Bellini was often absent from important meetings, that he seemed to be avoiding Salvatore. She also discovered that he had been making secret trips to Rome, meeting with individuals known to be associated with the Russo family. She shared her suspicions with Salvatore, but he was initially resistant.
Riccardo? No, it's impossible, he said.
He's family.
I've known him my whole life.
But the evidence, Juliana insisted. It's all pointing to him. Salvatore was torn. He didn't want to believe that his cousin, his childhood friend, could have betrayed him. But he couldn't ignore the evidence that Juliana was presenting. He agreed to investigate Bellini, to put him under surveillance, to tap his phones, to follow his movements. The results were damning. They discovered that Bellini had been in contact with the Russos for years, that he had been providing them with information about the Costa family's operations, that he had been secretly siphoning off funds from their businesses. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Emilia, the housekeeper, approached Juliana one evening, her face pale and drawn. "Signora," she said, her voice trembling, I overheard something. A conversation between Don Bellini and another man.
They were talking about the past.
About Isabella. Emilia had overheard Bellini admitting his role in Isabella's death, revealing that he had been in love with her, that he had betrayed Salvatore out of jealousy, out of a desire to take his place. Juliana immediately informed Salvatore. He was devastated, his face a mask of grief and rage. The cracks she had been looking for, in the foundation of his empire and his heart, were widening, threatening to tear him apart. He had trusted Bellini, had considered him a brother, and that brother had betrayed him, had murdered the woman he loved. "I will make him pay," Salvatore said, his voice low and deadly. "He will suffer for what he has done." Juliana's heart was breaking for him, but she knew she had done the right thing. Juliana felt a surge of fear, but also a sense of grim satisfaction. She had uncovered the truth. She had exposed the traitor. But she knew that this was just the beginning. The confrontation with Bellini would be dangerous, potentially deadly. The cracks in the foundation were visible now, but the collapse was yet to come. The palazzo, once a symbol of power and stability, now felt like a powder keg, waiting to explode. The scent of the lilies, once a comfort, now felt like a funeral shroud, a premonition of the violence that was to come. The weight of the truth was heavy, but Juliana knew she could not back down. She had chosen this path. She had become a part of this world. And she would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The storm was brewing, and she was standing at its center, bracing herself for the inevitable onslaught. Chapter 13. Unveiling the Past. The decision to confront Riccardo Bellini was not taken lightly. Salvatore knew that it would be a dangerous undertaking, a potential trigger for a war between factions within the Costa family. He spent days planning, strategizing, preparing for every possible outcome. He gathered his most loyal men, his most trusted lieutenants, ensuring that they were ready for a fight. Juliana, despite her fear, insisted on being present. She had played a crucial role in uncovering Bellini's betrayal, and she felt a responsibility to see it through to the end. She also wanted to be there for Salvatore, to offer him support, to be a witness to his pain and his rage. The confrontation took place in Salvatore's study, the same room where he had first offered Juliana the protection of the Costa family. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the air heavy with unspoken threats. Bellini arrived, his usual charm replaced by a nervous arrogance. He knew he was under suspicion, but he clearly didn't believe that Salvatore had enough evidence to act against him. "Salvatore, my cousin," Bellini said, his voice smooth and unctuous. "What is the meaning of this summons?" Salvatore stood behind his desk, his face a mask of cold fury. "You know why you're here, Riccardo," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I have no idea," Bellini replied, feigning innocence. "I have been loyal to you, to the family, my entire life." Salvatore slammed his hand on the desk, the sound echoing through the room. "Don't lie to me,"
he roared.
"I know about your betrayal. I know about Isabella." Bellini's facade crumbled. His face paled, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. Salvatore presented the evidence, the phone records, the surveillance reports, Emilia's testimony. Bellini's denials became increasingly weak, his lies increasingly transparent. "You were in love with her, weren't you?" Salvatore said, his voice filled with a mixture of grief and rage. "You were jealous. You wanted what I had." Bellini finally broke down, confessing everything. He admitted his love for Isabella, his resentment of Salvatore, his years of treachery. He begged for forgiveness, pleading for his life. "You took everything from me," Salvatore said, his voice trembling. "You took the woman I loved. You betrayed my trust. You dishonored our family." He looked at Bellini, his eyes filled with a cold, merciless hatred.
"You deserve to die," he said.
But then he hesitated. He looked at Juliana, her face pale but resolute. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also the strength, the compassion. He remembered her words, her plea for justice, for a better way. He took a deep breath, his gaze shifting back to Bellini. "But I will not kill you," he said. "That is not the way of our family. Not anymore." Instead, he banished Bellini, stripping him of his rank, his wealth, his connections. He exiled him from Naples, forbidding him from ever setting foot in the city again. It was a fate worse than death for a man like Bellini, a man who had lived his entire life in the shadow of the Costa family, a man who had craved power and status above all else. As Bellini was escorted from the palazzo, his face a mask of shame and despair, Juliana felt a sense of relief, but also a profound sadness. The past had been unveiled, the truth had been revealed, but the scars remained. The betrayal had wounded Salvatore deeply, shaking his faith in family, in loyalty, in everything he had ever believed in. That night, Juliana found him in the gardens, standing by the lilac bush, his face illuminated by the moonlight. He was silent, his expression unreadable. She approached him cautiously, placing a hand on his arm. "Are you all right?" she asked. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a deep, profound sadness. "I don't know," he said. "I feel lost." Juliana understood. She had seen the toll the betrayal had taken on him, the way it had shattered his world. She knew that he needed time to heal, to rebuild his trust, to find his way back from the darkness. "You're not alone," she said, her voice soft. "I'm here. We'll get through this together." The past had been unveiled, and there had been a reckoning. But the repercussions of this discovery, and their choices, were not yet over. He turned to her, his gaze intense. He reached out, his hand gently touching her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. It was a gesture of tenderness, of gratitude, of a love that had grown in the midst of darkness, of betrayal, of violence. The scent of the jasmine, stronger now as the night deepened, felt symbolic of a new foundation. He had spared a life, broken a cycle, all thanks to the woman who stood beside him. The weight of the ring on her finger felt different now, a symbol not of a bargain, but of a bond, a connection forged in the crucible of shared pain, of shared hope. The Neapolitan moon shone down on them, its silvery light a silent witness to their love, to their resilience, to their determination to build a new future, a future free from the shadows of the past. Chapter 14. Scars that never heal. The aftermath of Bellini's banishment was a period of quiet reflection and rebuilding. The Costa family, shaken by the betrayal, began a process of internal reform, of re-evaluating its values, its traditions, its way of doing business. Salvatore, guided by Giuliana's influence, initiated changes, seeking to move away from the violence and corruption that had characterized the Camorra for generations. He focused on strengthening the legitimate aspects of the family's enterprises, investing in community projects, supporting local businesses, creating opportunities for the people of Naples. He sought to restore the family's reputation, to transform it from an organization feared and reviled into one respected and admired. Giuliana played a crucial role in this transformation. She used her connections in the city, her knowledge of the community, to build bridges, to foster relationships, to create a sense of trust and cooperation. She became a liaison between the Costa family and the people of Naples, a voice for the voiceless, a champion of the underprivileged. She also reopened her florist shop, Fiori di Napoli, transforming it into a symbol of hope and renewal. The shop became a gathering place for the community, a place where people could find beauty, solace, and a sense of belonging. She hired local residents, providing them with jobs, with training, with a chance to build a better future. But despite the progress, despite the positive changes, the scars of the past remained. Salvatore struggled with the weight of Bellini's betrayal, with the guilt he felt over Isabella's death. He had nightmares, flashbacks, moments of intense anger and sadness. He found it difficult to trust, to open himself up to others, to believe in the possibility of a better future. Giuliana was his constant support, his anchor, his confidant. She listened to his fears, his doubts, his regrets. She offered him comfort, understanding, and an unwavering belief in his ability to change, to heal. She shared her own experiences with loss, with grief, with the long, difficult process of rebuilding a life shattered by tragedy. One evening, as they were walking through the gardens, Salvatore stopped by the lilac bush, his face etched with pain. "I still see her," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Isabella. I still dream of her." Giuliana placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle and reassuring. "She will always be a part of you," she said. "But she wouldn't want you to live in the past. She would want you to be happy." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. You have brought light back into my life, Giuliana," he said. "You have shown me that there is still beauty in the world, that there is still hope." He reached out, his hand cupping her face, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "I love you, Giuliana," he said, the words raw and honest, a confession that had been building in his heart for months. Giuliana's heart skipped a beat. She had fallen in love with him, too, despite the danger, despite the darkness, despite the scars of the past. She had seen the goodness in him, the vulnerability, the capacity for change. She had found a love she never expected, a love that had blossomed in the most unlikely of circumstances. "I love you, too, Salvatore," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. He leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a kiss that sealed their love, their commitment, their shared hope for a future free from the shadows of the past. It was a kiss that acknowledged the scars that would never fully heal, but also celebrated the strength, the resilience, the love that had grown between them. As they stood there, embraced in the moonlight, the scent of the jasmine and the distant sound of the waves washing ashore seemed to blend together, creating a symphony of hope, of healing, of a love that had defied the odds, a love that had blossomed in the heart of the Neapolitan underworld. The scars remained, a reminder of the past, but they were no longer a source of pain, of fear. They were a testament to their strength, their resilience, their ability to love, to forgive, to rebuild. They were a part of their story, a story that was still being written, a story of two souls intertwined, bound together by fate, by loss, by a love that had emerged from the ashes of betrayal and violence. Chapter 15. The Heart of the Enemy. With their love confessed and their commitment to a new future solidified, Juliana and Salvatore faced the daunting task of navigating the treacherous waters of the Neapolitan underworld. The changes Salvatore was implementing within the Costa family were met with resistance from some of the older, more traditional members who saw his reforms as a weakness, a betrayal of their heritage. There were whispers of dissent, rumors of plots to overthrow him, to restore the Camorra to its former glory, its former ruthlessness. Salvatore knew that he was walking a tightrope, that one wrong move could plunge the family into another bloody conflict. Juliana, despite her fear, remained his steadfast ally, his advisor, his confidant. She used her intuition, her knowledge of the city, her growing network of contacts to anticipate threats, to identify potential enemies, to help Salvatore navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries. One of the most significant threats came from the remnants of the Russo family, still smarting from their past defeats, still seeking revenge for Isabella's death. While Bellini had been the instrument of their vengeance, they had never forgotten, never forgiven. They saw Salvatore's reforms as an opportunity to weaken the Costa family, to strike a decisive blow. Juliana discovered that the Russos were planning an attack on the Palazzo Costa, a brazen assault intended to eliminate Salvatore and seize control of the family's operations. She learned of the plot through a network of informants she had cultivated, individuals who had grown disillusioned with the violence and corruption of the Camorra, who sought a different path. She immediately informed Salvatore, and they began to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. They strengthened the Palazzo's defenses, alerted their loyal men, and developed a strategy to counter the Russos' attack. Juliana, despite her lack of experience in such matters, proved to be a valuable asset. She suggested innovative tactics, drawing on her knowledge of the Palazzo's layout, its secret passages, its hidden vulnerabilities. She also insisted on remaining at Salvatore's side, refusing to be relegated to a place of safety, determined to face the danger alongside him. The attack came on a moonless night, a coordinated assault by a heavily armed force of Russo soldiers. The Palazzo became a battleground, the sounds of gunfire and explosions echoing through the halls, shattering the tranquility of the estate. Juliana, armed with a small pistol Salvatore had given her, found herself in the midst of the chaos, fighting alongside the Costa men, defending her home, her family, her love. She witnessed firsthand the brutality of the Camorra, the senseless violence, the devastating consequences of hatred and revenge. In the midst of the fighting, she saw Salvatore, his face grim and determined, leading his men, fighting with a ferocity born of years of experience, of a deep-seated need to protect those he cared about. She saw the courage in him, the strength, but also the vulnerability, the fear that he tried so hard to conceal. She also saw the heart of the enemy, the cold, calculating ruthlessness of the Russo soldiers, their willingness to kill, to maim, to destroy. She realized that this was not just a battle for power, for control. It was a battle for the soul of Naples, a battle between the forces of darkness and the forces of light. As the fighting raged, Juliana found herself separated from Salvatore, trapped in a corridor, facing a group of Russo soldiers. She fired her pistol, hitting one of them, but she was outnumbered, outgunned. She knew that she was in mortal danger, that she might not survive. But then, she saw Emilia, the housekeeper, armed with a kitchen knife, charging towards the Russo soldiers, her face a mask of fury. Emilia, the quiet, reserved woman who had been a silent observer of the Palazzo's secrets, was now a fierce warrior, defending her home, her family. Emilia's unexpected intervention gave Juliana the opportunity to escape, to rejoin Salvatore. Together, they fought their way through the Palazzo, repelling the Russo attack, driving them back, forcing them to retreat. The battle was over, but the cost was high. Several Costa men had been killed, many more injured. The Palazzo was damaged, scarred by the violence. But they had survived. They had defended their home, their family. They had defeated the heart of the enemy. The scent of gunpowder mingled with the night air, a grim reminder of the violence, but also a testament to their resilience, their determination to survive. Chapter 16. A Betrayal Foretold. The victory over the Russos, while hard-won, did not bring peace. It merely shifted the battleground. Salvatore knew that the attack was not an isolated incident, that it was part of a larger conspiracy to undermine his leadership, to destabilize the Costa family. He suspected that there were traitors within his own ranks, individuals who were secretly working with the Russos, who were providing them with information, with support. He tasked Juliana with uncovering the identity of these traitors, trusting her intuition, her ability to see through deception, to read between the lines. He knew that it was a dangerous task, that she would be putting herself at risk, but he also knew that she was the only one he could truly trust. Juliana began her investigation, discreetly questioning members of the Costa family, their associates, their contacts. She reviewed old records, analyzed financial transactions, searched for any clues, any inconsistencies, any sign of betrayal. She discovered that several of Salvatore's lieutenants, men he had trusted for years, had been secretly meeting with Russo representatives, that they had been receiving large sums of money, that they had been providing information about the Costa family's operations, their defenses, their plans. The evidence was overwhelming, but Juliana hesitated to reveal her findings to Salvatore. She knew that it would devastate him, that it would shake his faith in his own judgment, in his ability to lead. She also knew that it could trigger another internal conflict, a bloody purge within the Costa family. She decided to consult with Emilia, the housekeeper, seeking her advice, her wisdom. Emilia had been a silent observer of the Palazzo's secrets for decades. She had witnessed countless betrayals, countless power struggles. She had a deep understanding of the Costa family, its dynamics, its vulnerabilities. "Signora," Emilia said, her voice low and grave, "you must tell Don Salvatore. He must know the truth, no matter how painful it may be." "But it will destroy him," Juliana replied. "He has already suffered so much." "It will also save him," Emilia said. "The longer these traitors remain, the greater the danger. They are like a cancer, eating away at the heart of the family." Juliana knew that Emilia was right. She had to tell Salvatore, no matter the consequences. That evening, she presented her findings to him, laying out the evidence, naming the traitors. Salvatore listened in silence, his face a mask of disbelief, of anger, of profound sadness. "These men, I trusted them," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I considered them brothers." "I know," Juliana said softly. "But they have betrayed you. They have betrayed the family." Salvatore slammed his fist on the table, his rage erupting. "They will pay," he vowed. "They will all pay." But Juliana placed a hand on his arm, calming him. "No," she said. "No more violence. No more bloodshed. There has to be another way." She suggested a different approach, a strategy that would expose the traitors without resorting to violence, that would isolate them, that would strip them of their power, their influence. She proposed using their own betrayal against them, revealing their treachery to the other members of the Camorra, turning them into pariahs, outcasts. Salvatore, initially resistant, eventually agreed. He saw the wisdom in her plan, the potential to avoid another bloody conflict, to preserve the fragile peace he had been working so hard to achieve. Together, they orchestrated a masterful scheme, leaking information, spreading rumors, manipulating events, until the traitors were exposed, their treachery revealed to the entire Neapolitan underworld. They were shunned, ostracized, their power and influence destroyed. They were left with nothing, their betrayal foretold, and now made public. The betrayal had been uncovered, the threat neutralized, but the experience left a deep scar on Salvatore, on Juliana, on the entire Costa family. It was a reminder of the fragility of trust, of the constant danger that lurked in the shadows, of the price of power. The foundation had been rocked, but, with Juliana's influence, it would not break. The victory was bittersweet, a testament to their resilience, their ability to adapt, to survive, but also a reminder of the darkness that still lingered within the heart of the Camorra. The scent of lilies, once a symbol of her past, her old life, and then a reminder of death and grief, now carried a new fragrance, that of strategy and of choosing to wield power with a measured hand, thanks to her growing influence. Chapter 17. Threads of Loyalty and Lies. The exposure and subsequent ostracization of the traitors within the Costa family sent ripples throughout the Neapolitan underworld. Salvatore's authority, once questioned, was now reinforced, his reputation as a leader who valued loyalty and punished betrayal firmly established. However, the victory was not without its complexities. The threads of loyalty and lies were so interwoven that untangling them proved to be a delicate and dangerous task. Juliana, now deeply embedded in the workings of the Costa family, found herself increasingly involved in the day-to-day operations. She became a trusted advisor to Salvatore, her insights and intuition proving invaluable in navigating the treacherous political landscape of the Camorra. She also took on a more public role, representing the family at social events, meeting with community leaders, and working to improve the Costa's image in Naples. One persistent thread of concern was the lingering influence of the Russo family. While their attempted attack on the palazzo had been thwarted, they remained a significant threat, their desire for revenge undiminished. Juliana knew that they would not simply disappear, that they would continue to plot and scheme, waiting for an opportunity to strike again. She began to investigate the Russos' current activities, their connections, their sources of funding. She discovered that they were receiving support from a surprising source, a powerful politician in Rome, a man with deep ties to the Italian government, a man who had a vested interest in destabilizing the Costa family and gaining control of their lucrative businesses. This politician, Senator Lorenzo Moretti, was a shadowy figure, a man who operated behind the scenes, pulling strings, manipulating events to his own advantage. He was known for his ruthlessness, his ambition, and his willingness to use any means necessary to achieve his goals. Juliana realized that Moretti was a far more dangerous enemy than the Russos themselves. He had the power and the influence to bring down the entire Costa family, to destroy everything Salvatore had worked so hard to build. She shared her findings with Salvatore, and they began to develop a strategy to counter Moretti's influence, to expose his corruption, to neutralize his threat. It was a risky undertaking, a challenge to a powerful and well-connected individual, but they knew that they had no choice. They had to protect their family, their future. They decided to use Moretti's own tactics against him, gathering information, exposing his secrets, using the media to turn public opinion against him. It was a delicate dance, a game of cat and mouse, where one wrong move could have devastating consequences. Juliana, leveraging her growing network of contacts, managed to obtain incriminating documents, evidence of Moretti's corruption, his illegal dealings, his connections to organized crime. She leaked this information to a trusted journalist, a woman known for her integrity and her willingness to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The journalist published a series of explosive articles detailing Moretti's crimes, exposing his hypocrisy, revealing his connections to the Camorra. The articles caused a public outcry, a demand for justice, a call for Moretti's resignation. Moretti, caught in the crosshairs of public scrutiny, found his power and influence rapidly eroding. He tried to fight back, using his connections to suppress the story, to discredit the journalist, to intimidate Juliana and Salvatore. But it was too late. The truth was out, and the people of Naples, tired of corruption and violence, rallied behind Juliana and Salvatore, demanding an end to Moretti's reign of terror. The threads of lies were unraveling, and the loyalty of those around Juliana and Salvatore were being tested. The battle was far from over, but they had gained a significant advantage, exposing the hidden hand that had been manipulating events, threatening their lives, and challenging their future. The scent of jasmine in the gardens seemed to grow stronger, its fragrance a symbol of their resilience, their determination to fight for justice, for a better future, for a Naples free from the grip of corruption and violence. It was, they both knew, a temporary victory, but it brought them closer to the true freedom they sought. Chapter 18. The Storm Breaks. The exposure of Senator Moretti's corruption sent shockwaves through the Italian political establishment. The public outcry was deafening, demanding his immediate resignation and a thorough investigation into his activities. Moretti, once a powerful and untouchable figure, found himself isolated, his allies deserting him, his enemies circling like vultures. He knew that he was finished, that his career was over, that he faced the prospect of imprisonment. But he was not a man to go down without a fight. He was determined to take revenge on those he blamed for his downfall, Juliana and Salvatore Costa. He used his remaining connections, his dwindling resources, to launch a final, desperate attack. He hired a team of mercenaries, former Special Forces soldiers, highly trained and heavily armed. He ordered them to assassinate Juliana and Salvatore, to wipe out the Costa family, to send a message to anyone who dared to challenge him. The attack came swiftly and unexpectedly. Juliana and Salvatore were attending a charity event, a fundraiser for a local hospital, a symbol of their commitment to the community, to a new Naples. The event was held in a grand, historic palazzo filled with dignitaries, community leaders, and prominent members of Neapolitan society. As Juliana and Salvatore were mingling with the guests, the mercenaries stormed the palazzo, their weapons blazing, their faces masked, their movements precise and deadly. Chaos erupted, screams filling the air, as guests scrambled for cover, seeking shelter from the hail of bullets. Salvatore, reacting instantly, pushed Juliana behind a large marble statue, shielding her with his body. He drew his own weapon, returning fire, engaging the mercenaries, trying to protect the innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. Juliana, despite her fear, refused to cower. She grabbed a heavy silver candelabra, using it as a weapon, striking one of the mercenaries, knocking him to the ground. She helped other guests to safety, guiding them to a secure room, offering them comfort and reassurance. The battle raged throughout the palazzo, the sounds of gunfire and explosions echoing through the ornate halls, shattering the illusion of peace and civility. Salvatore, fighting with the ferocity of a cornered lion, managed to kill several of the mercenaries, but he was outnumbered, outgunned. He was wounded, a bullet grazing his arm, another piercing his leg. He stumbled, falling to the ground, his weapon slipping from his grasp. One of the mercenaries stood over him, his gun aimed at Salvatore's head, ready to deliver the killing blow. But then, Juliana appeared, her face a mask of fury, her eyes blazing with determination. She lunged at the mercenary, striking him with the candelabra, knocking him off balance. She grabbed Salvatore's weapon, firing at the mercenary, killing him instantly. She knelt beside Salvatore, her hands trembling, her face streaked with tears. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. He nodded, his gaze locking with hers. I love you," he said, his voice weak but sincere. "I love you, too," she replied, her tears falling onto his face. With the help of loyal members of the Costa family who had arrived on the scene, they managed to repel the remaining mercenaries, forcing them to retreat. The attack had been thwarted, but the cost was heavy. Several innocent people had been killed, many more injured. The palazzo was a scene of devastation, a symbol of the violence that still plagued Naples, of the enemies who still sought to destroy them. The storm had broken, unleashing its fury, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. But Juliana and Salvatore had survived. They had faced the ultimate test, their love, their loyalty, their courage forged in the crucible of violence and betrayal. The scent of blood mingled with the shattered remnants of the evening, a grim reminder of the cost of their fight, but also a testament to their unwavering determination to survive, to protect each other, to build a better future. The sounds of sirens filled the night air as emergency services converged. Chapter 19. Blood on the Cobblestones. The aftermath of the attack at the charity event was a chaotic scene of flashing lights, sirens, and the hushed whispers of survivors. Juliana, her hands still trembling, stayed by Salvatore's side as paramedics tended to his wounds. The bullet in his leg was serious, but thankfully, not life-threatening. He was rushed to a private clinic, a secure location known only to a trusted few, where he could receive the best possible care without fear of further attacks. Juliana refused to leave his side, staying with him through the surgery, through the long, anxious hours of recovery. She held his hand, whispered words of comfort, her presence a constant reassurance, a beacon of hope in the midst of the darkness. While Salvatore recovered, Giuliana took charge, coordinating the family's response, ensuring the safety of their loved ones, and working with the authorities to investigate the attack. She knew that Moretti was behind it, that this was his final, desperate act of revenge. But she needed proof, evidence that would link him directly to the mercenaries, to the attempted assassination. She worked tirelessly, using her network of contacts, her intuition, her growing knowledge of the Neapolitan underworld, to gather information, to piece together the puzzle. She discovered that Moretti had used a shell company to hire the mercenaries, that he had transferred large sums of money to offshore accounts, that he had been in contact with known criminals in the days leading up to the attack. The evidence was mounting, but it was still circumstantial. She needed a smoking gun, a direct link that would prove Moretti's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. She decided to take a risky gamble. She reached out to one of Moretti's closest associates, a man named Giovanni Rizzo, a man who had been Moretti's confidant for years, a man who knew all of his secrets. Giuliana knew that Rizzo was ambitious, that he had always resented Moretti's power, that he secretly desired to take his place. She met with Rizzo in a secluded location, a small, unassuming trattoria in a quiet neighborhood of Naples. She offered him a deal: immunity from prosecution, protection from Moretti's wrath, and a share of the Costa family's influence in exchange for his testimony. Rizzo was hesitant, wary of betrayal, but he also saw an opportunity to advance his own interests, to rid himself of Moretti, to seize power for himself. He agreed to cooperate, providing Giuliana with the evidence she needed, a recorded conversation between Moretti and the leader of the mercenaries, in which Moretti explicitly ordered the assassination of Giuliana and Salvatore. With this evidence in hand, Giuliana went to the authorities, presenting them with a complete and irrefutable case against Moretti. The police issued a warrant for Moretti's arrest, and he was taken into custody, his reign of terror finally over. But the victory was short-lived. As Moretti was being transported to prison, a group of armed men ambushed the police convoy, freeing Moretti and killing several officers. It was a brazen act of defiance, a clear indication that Moretti still had powerful allies, that he was not yet defeated. Giuliana knew that Moretti would come after them, that he would seek revenge, that he would stop at nothing to destroy them. She and Salvatore were now in even greater danger, their lives hanging in the balance. Salvatore, still recovering from his injuries, insisted on leaving the clinic, on returning to the Palazzo Costa, on facing Moretti head-on. He knew that they could not hide, that they could not run. They had to fight. They fortified the Palazzo, preparing for a final showdown. They gathered their most loyal men, their most trusted allies, knowing that this would be a battle to the death. As they waited for Moretti's inevitable attack, Giuliana and Salvatore stood together on the terrace, overlooking the city of Naples, the city they had fought so hard to protect, the city they loved. The blood on the cobblestones, both recent and past, was a grim reminder of the cost. "I'm afraid," Giuliana said, her voice trembling. Salvatore took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We will face this together," he said. "We always have. We always will." The night was dark, the air thick with anticipation. The storm had broken, and now the final reckoning was at hand. The scent of the sea mingled with the faint aroma of gunpowder, a premonition of the violence to come, a testament to their courage, their love, their unwavering determination to survive, to protect each other, to build a future free from the shadows of the past. Their fate, and the fate of Naples, hung in the balance. Chapter 20. Redemption in the Ruins. The final confrontation with Moretti came, as expected, under the cover of darkness. He arrived at the Palazzo Costa not with an army of mercenaries, but alone, a shadow slipping through the gates, armed with a single pistol and a burning desire for revenge. He had lost everything: his power, his reputation, his freedom, and he blamed Giuliana and Salvatore for his downfall. Salvatore, alerted to Moretti's presence by the Palazzo's security system, met him in the grand foyer, the same place where he had first offered Juliana the protection of the Costa family, the same place where so many secrets had been revealed, so many battles fought. Juliana stood beside him, armed and ready, her fear overshadowed by a fierce determination to protect the man she loved, the life they had built together. "Moretti," Salvatore said, his voice cold and steady. "You should not have come here." Moretti laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. "I have nothing left to lose," he said. "You took everything from me. Now, I will take everything from you." He raised his pistol, aiming at Salvatore, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could fire, Juliana stepped in front of Salvatore, shielding him with her body.
"No," she cried.
"You will not hurt him." Moretti hesitated, his eyes flickering with a mixture of surprise and confusion. He had not expected this act of selfless courage, this display of unwavering love. "Get out of the way, Juliana," Salvatore said, his voice urgent. "This is between me and him." "No," she replied, her gaze fixed on Moretti. "This is about all of us. About the future of Naples. About ending this cycle of violence." She spoke to Moretti, her voice filled with a strange mixture of compassion and defiance. She spoke of the pain he had caused, the lives he had destroyed, the damage he had done to the city they both loved. She spoke of the possibility of redemption, of forgiveness, of a different path. "It's not too late, Lorenzo," she said. "You can still choose a different way. You can still make amends for what you've done." Moretti wavered, his resolve crumbling, his eyes filled with a flicker of doubt, of regret. He lowered his pistol slightly, his hand trembling. But then, a shot rang out, shattering the silence. Moretti gasped, his body jerking, his eyes widening in disbelief. He looked down at his chest, at the spreading stain of blood, at the small, smoking hole in his shirt. He had been shot, not by Juliana or Salvatore, but by Emilia, the housekeeper, who stood on the grand staircase, a rifle in her hands, her face a mask of grim determination. "Enough," she said, her voice cold and steady. "Enough blood has been spilled." Moretti collapsed to the floor, his life ebbing away, his final act of revenge thwarted, his reign of terror finally over. Emilia lowered the rifle, her hands trembling, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and relief. She had protected her family, her home, the people she cared about. She had ended the violence, but at a terrible cost. Salvatore rushed to Juliana, embracing her, holding her close, his heart overflowing with love and gratitude. She had saved his life. She had shown him the true meaning of courage, of sacrifice, of love. As the police arrived, taking Moretti's body away, securing the palazzo, Juliana and Salvatore stood together, watching the dawn break over the city of Naples. The ruins of the past were all around them, the scars of violence and betrayal still fresh, but the future stretched before them, filled with the promise of hope, of healing, of redemption. They had faced the darkness, they had survived the storm, they had found love and strength in each other. And they were ready to rebuild, to create a new Naples, a city free from the grip of the Camorra, a city where justice and peace could finally prevail. The long night was over. Emilia's actions, though born of a desperate need to protect, echoed with an understanding of the cycle of violence. Juliana and Salvatore looked at each other, a silent understanding between them. Justice had been served in an unexpected way, but redemption and a new future was in their hands. Epilogue. The years that followed were a testament to the transformative power of love, resilience, and a commitment to building a better future. Salvatore, guided by Juliana's unwavering support and wise counsel, continued to steer the Costa family away from its criminal past, focusing on legitimate businesses, community development, and philanthropic endeavors. The Palazzo Costa, once a symbol of fear and oppression, became a center for social change, hosting workshops, educational programs, and initiatives aimed at empowering the people of Naples. Juliana, fully embracing her role as the Donna of the Costa family, became a beloved figure in the city, known for her compassion, her generosity, and her unwavering dedication to justice. She reopened Fiori di Napoli, expanding it into a thriving business that provided employment and training opportunities for local residents, particularly women seeking to escape difficult circumstances. The shop became a symbol of hope and renewal, its vibrant blossoms a constant reminder of the beauty that could emerge from even the darkest of times. Marco and Sofia, initially wary of their mother's relationship with Salvatore, gradually came to accept him, to respect him, and even to love him. They saw the changes he was making, the genuine remorse he felt for his past actions, and the unwavering love he had for their mother. Marco, channeling his impulsive nature into constructive pursuits, became involved in the family's legitimate businesses, using his skills with mechanics to create a successful automotive repair shop that provided affordable services to the community. Sofia, her artistic talent blossoming, used her art to raise awareness about social issues, to promote peace and understanding, and to beautify the city with murals and public art installations. Emilia, her act of violence in defending the family a closely guarded secret, remained a steadfast presence in the palazzo, her quiet strength and unwavering loyalty a source of comfort and stability. She became a mentor to Juliana, sharing her wisdom, her knowledge of the Costa family's history, and her deep understanding of the Neapolitan soul. She found a measure of peace in her service, her act of violence redeemed by the positive changes it had enabled. Salvatore and Juliana, their love deepened by shared challenges and triumphs, found solace and joy in each other's company. They often walked hand in hand through the gardens of the palazzo, the scent of jasmine and roses a constant reminder of their journey, of the love that had blossomed in the midst of darkness, of the future they were building together. The lilac bush, once a symbol of loss and betrayal, now bloomed every spring, its delicate flowers a testament to the enduring power of love, of forgiveness, of second chances. One warm spring evening, as the sun set over the Bay of Naples, casting a golden glow over the city, Salvatore and Juliana stood on the terrace, looking out at the breathtaking view. They were older now, their hair streaked with silver, their faces lined with the marks of time and experience, but their love for each other remained as strong and vibrant as ever. Salvatore took Juliana's hand, his touch gentle and loving. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "For saving me.
For believing in me.
For loving me." Juliana smiled, her eyes sparkling with tears of joy. "We saved each other," she replied. "We found each other. And we built a new life, a new world, together." They embraced, their hearts filled with gratitude, with peace, with a love that had defied the odds, a love that had conquered darkness, a love that had brought redemption to the ruins of their past. The Neapolitan moon shone down on them, its silvery light a silent blessing, a testament to their enduring love, their unwavering hope, their triumphant journey from the shadows of the Camorra to the light of a new dawn. The scent of the sea mingled with the fragrance of the flowers, a perfect symphony of peace, a testament to a future built on love, forgiveness, and a commitment to a better world. And at last, they were truly free.